Oh, I'm sure she was. I'm gonna have to get your number, and I'll be putting an order in next week.
Okay, you do that. I'll get it for you because it just blows me away. My famous story was my ex-husband's shoes. He's a size 12D, so that's not the normal size shoe for a man. And he was going for a job interview, and he wanted brown wingtip shoes. Now, that was a tall order for God, but I said, you know what, I'm going to put it out there. So I prayed, and it didn't happen right away, but this one particular day I was, going to yard sales. I would go every Saturday, and I walked into the yard sale, and there was boxes of shoes, and I got all excited, and I started to look in the shoes. There was no, men's shoes. As I was leaving, the man came over and said, what are you looking for? And I said, oh, you don't have it. And he said, well, what do you want? I said, I'm looking for a man's size shoe, size 12D. And he said, come this way. And we walked around, and there were more boxes of shoes, which I hadn't seen. So he starts looking through them, and there they were, size 12D brown wingtip shoes, and they were $10.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. Of course, now I'm all excited, and I'm saying to him, I prayed for these shoes, and he's just looking at me like I was crazy. And he said, I had a shoe store, and I had these shoes in my basement for years, and I just decided today to have a yard sale. So that was my wonderful story, and brought them home to my ex, and they fit him perfectly, and he went on a job interview. Yeah, so nothing is too big for my God.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about that story, too, and you talk about it in your book about the fact that there are 3 answers to prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us, because one of those, you said one of those answers was wait.
Wait.
And it sounds like that's exactly what happened, and not only for you, but also for the man who held the shoes in his basement all that time.
Right.
It's almost, yeah.
And that waiting, I like to liken it to being in the hallway. Oftentimes one door is closed,
right,
and the other one hasn't opened, and we're in that hallway, and sometimes we're banging on the door, like open the door, or we want to go back into the door that's closed. And it's in that waiting place that we really grow our faith muscles.
Yeah, and boy, and I'll tell you what, one of the big dangers you just really hit on is wanting to go back through the door we just came out of.
Yes.
But rather than spend our time in the hall and then get back in the same mess we were in before.
Exactly. And it's so easy to do, I think, for, like entrepreneurs who are starting a new business, when, especially in this economy, when things aren't happening as quick as, they would like it to happen.
Yeah, not even close.
Temptation to go get another job. I've experienced it myself.
Sure.
In starting my new business and, doing workshops, and sometimes the workshop was canceled, and that temptation to say, okay, maybe I should get another job, when I know that God is calling me to just trust. And that seems to be the word of the month for me, is trust. And many of my friends are going through some difficult times, and we're all talking about that God is calling us to trust even more deeply, that God is my source, and God will take care of us.
I think that, that need is really a driving force that underlies this transformation that I believe is in process and has been in process for quite a while. I think we're coming closer to that transformation than we've ever been before. Most of the people I talk with that that are on this spiritual path, they have a sense for it, a feeling for it.
Yes.
So there's I want to get back to your size 12D shoes here for a minute, because your story about how you met your husband felt almost like a soulmate kind of story. How about telling us a bit about how you came, because you were with him 25 years, weren't you? 30. 30 years. 30 years, yes. Tell us the story about how you met him.
Well, I met him in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and it was really amazing. When I met him, he said that he didn't believe in God, and I was, very. I guess I would be more religious than spiritual. And he asked me to marry him in 8 weeks, and right before he asked me to marry him, I'm not sure this is even in the book, but this is what's coming into my mind. We were in church together, and he did come with me to church, even though when we first met, he said he was an atheist. But he decided to come to church with me, and this one particular day we were in church, and all of a sudden I just felt this, I felt like I was being lifted up, and I knew something had happened to me, and when we were leaving, I said to him, something happened to me in church, and I described it, and it happened to him the same exact time, and he felt the same kind of a lifting, a power was coming upon us. So that's how we started our marriage, and we, very early in our marriage, we did a marriage encounter, which is a wonderful weekend to help couples to make their marriages better.
Right.
And so we did that for many years as a couple.
Well, you know what? I while you were telling the story, I really put you on the spot with that question because my memory kind of was bad. What I was remembering was the story that you wrote in the book, and it wasn't about you; it was about someone else who met someone.
Okay.
Do you recall? Yeah, I apologize for that.
That's okay. I'm thinking, I don't remember writing.
Yeah, what is this about? Where did this guy get this deal at? I believe it was at a conference or something. That story.
There were, I'm trying to think if...
Well, that's all right. It's not.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
not a problem.
There was something about a conference that I met somebody.
Right. Well, I've written a book too, and people tell me, well, and I think, oh God, did I write that?
I know.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Well, you write a book and it's got 100 or 200 pages in it. You cover a lot of territory.
Right,
so.
right. Well, I guess it was meant to be, George, that I shared that story of my husband and I, ex-husband and I, and how we met because. I don't know. I guess I needed to remember that. We were married for 30 years, and unfortunately, we did get a divorce, and that was very painful.
I'm sure it was.
But we were just growing. We were growing apart, and.
Well, the world we live in, Pat. We spend so much time. And getting ourselves into the pain of trying to make permanent what's impermanent. There's nothing that I see in the world we live in that's permanent.
That's right.
Nothing. Right. And the more I try and cling to it and hold on to it, the more pain I can put myself into.
Exactly.
When I'm willing to flow with whatever, with what's going on.
And I know that if I had stayed in a marriage, I would not be where I am today. I would not have written a book. There's just no way.
Yeah.
I really needed that to move forward in my life, and I'm very grateful, that I had the courage to do that.
Let's talk. Yeah, I think it's amazing when I look at my life. I hear exactly what you're saying. If I had stayed with my first wife and with my first job, my life would have been, it would have been somebody else's life because it sure wouldn't have come up, even come close to the life I've had. There's been a lot, I've had difficulty in my life, but I've also had a lot of joy, and overall my life's been pretty rich, So tell me a bit about, you talk in the book about, and I know there are people in our audience who, this is a really big thing for them, and that is to find some way to really get to a place where they know that God is guiding them. And you talk about that a lot. As a matter of fact, you suggest, I believe, that God often gets your attention through symbols.
Yes.
Tell us what, how can someone really start getting this guidance that you're talking about? Because, we really do second guess ourselves in an awful lot of our life.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's really paying attention, listening to that voice. Butterflies are symbols for me. Of course, a butterfly is transformation.
Right.
My daughter-in-law died 2 years ago of cancer. And
oh boy.
Yeah, it was pretty painful, and she was only 37. But right after she died, and her symbol was the butterfly also.
Uh-huh.
And right after she died, was the next morning. I had prayed that morning and really cried and really asked to feel her presence. And I was leaving the house, and all of a sudden, this butterfly came and just surrounded, my head, kept going around and around, and I knew it was my daughter-in-law. And very often I'll see the butterfly, especially in times of need, and I'll know that symbol or that it's her presence. I feel like her spirit is with me. But there are so many. The turtle is another symbol that I have about the turtle for me is about going slow. And so much of my life, I rushed around and did things fast because I didn't want to go within. So the symbol for me, the turtle, is when to go in and when to go out.
Right.
So answering the question, I'm not sure if I answered it, but just to be aware, ask for signs.
Right. Well, I think you answered it very well. Signs and animals and so forth were always big with the Native Americans,
yes.
with shaman, with the natives in the Australian outback, with their dream time. And animals have always played a big part in all that.
Right.
But I think
another thing is songs.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Tell us about how God speaks to us through song.
Oh man, my mother died when I was 20 years old, and that was 42 years ago. And shortly after she died, her name was Honey. And shortly after she died, the song Honey came on. Are you familiar with Honey?
I was going, one of the questions I had for you, dedicated the book, and I saw the name Honey, and I was going to ask you who Honey was. And thank you for letting us know.
Yeah, Honey was my mother, and there's a song by Bobby Goldsboro by the name of Honey.
Absolutely, I recall.
Yeah, and it talks about someone who died, and right after she died, this song, Honey, came out, and I remember so clearly I was sitting in the back seat of a car when I heard this song, and it's all about, honey, I love you and I miss you. And over the 42 years, I've heard that song when I really needed to feel my mother's presence. One of the times was my father had died, and he died 11 years ago, and after he died, I remember taking a walk and praying and asking to feel his presence. And shortly after that, I went to the consignment store to buy some clothes for the funeral and the wake. And as I'm walking around, all of a sudden I hear Honey come on the radio, and I just stood there and I put my hands in my face and started to cry. And there was only me in the store, and the woman came over and said, are you okay? And I just said that my father just died, and Honey was my mother's name, and that song was playing. So I composed myself and continued to shop, and then another song came on, and it was Daddy's Little Girl, and that was the song my father used to sing to me.